You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that.
It's time to talk about it.
Pull up a chair and take a seat.
We're serving up recipes for life.
With Hampton University's Dr. Richard Mason and Dr. Tamara Williams.
Welcome to the Sunday Brunch.
This is Dr. Tamara Williams.
And this is Dr. Richard Mason. And welcome back to the table for another edition of Sunday Brunch with the Good Doctors.
The good doctors.
So good to have you back at the table. Good to see you.
It's great. It's great to be back at the table, bro. It is great to be back at the table, especially because we get to talk about whatever we want at this table.
Exactly. No topic is off limits. And that's good. Because it was once said, years ago, everybody started talking about having these courageous conversations and all around different topics or whatever. And it's one of the things I really like about what we have here at the table. We have an opportunity to really talk about some things that I think some families sit around and think about, but they never have an opportunity to talk about. And so being able to bring these topics to the table is such a blessing. And, I'm hoping, more and more listeners are really getting the benefit and the joy out of the topics that we're talking about.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you said courageous, because we get to be courageous at the table. And our guests get to be courageous in their conversations and in the information that they deliver. And we get to talk about things that people don't always feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, And I was talking to someone because I was asked, how did y'all come up with that? And I was sharing with them the whole, the creativity that came behind the building of this show and the conversation, and the topics, everything we talked about with Jay and putting this all together and all, just having that time where kids were seen and not heard. And even during the holidays, you were always sitting at the kids' table and, how you would whisper around things. My grandmother would always whisper when it was something that was bad or that was, not always a good thing. Like she would whisper, so-and-so, she got cancer. She would whisper the word cancer. She would necessarily come out and say cancer. And so little things like that, I think, has been very beneficial that we're able to talk about those things and not necessarily whisper those things.
My mom taught me that whatever you're running from is what you're running to. Whatever you're running from is what you're running to. And so the part of us being courageous is also having the conversations, because if we don't have these necessary conversations, we're destined to keep repeating the same type of things. We're destined to keep running towards the same things that we're running from. So I like that we get to be courageous at the table. I mean, we're courageous every week in the way we eat our bacon. We are courageous. We are courageous in the fact that, when we bring people to our table, we don't always know the full conversations that are going to happen. But we're trusting that they're necessary conversations with the necessary people.
Exactly. Some things just, the organic side of things, we start off with a topic, but the organic material that happens out of this, certainly, it's a blessing. I learned something new and different after every time we sit at this table. So I'm thoroughly enjoying our moments at the table. And it's not just because of the bacon. It's not just because of the butter, honey butter, and the biscuits. I love the conversations.
I love the conversations too. And the fact that we're always about mental health and we're always about education, because when we know better, we do better, or at least we should.
Exactly.
And today is no different.
Exactly.
We will be educated today. There's a lot of things that people are trying to not just remove from the tables, but from the classrooms, from the history books. There's a lot of things out there that people are trying to ignore, but whether you ignore it or not, it happened, it occurred, and it is definitely for real. So I am excited about our conversation today because we get to talk to someone who has, I don't like to say altered history, but has played a major role in correcting one of the results of history.
Exactly. And that's what this is all about, being that trailblazer, being that pioneer to right some wrongs. Because there's some things that have happened, especially to people of color throughout history. And so when we have an opportunity to right those wrongs and really make a change and make a difference moving forward, like you always say, when you know better, you do better. And that's what we have to hold people accountable for, and create that higher standard, especially as we're dealing with the whole DEI movement now and a lot of change that's happening out of DC and all. I'm hoping people can really see what the consequences are based on the results of their actions, whether you voted, did not vote, or who you voted for. Elections have consequences. And I think we are seeing those things now. There's some people who did not vote. There's some people that voted in favor of the current administration, and yet they are now having a lot of regrets at this point. And that's why you really have to pay attention when it comes to politics.
Every vote counts.
Yeah.
Every vote, every election. We're big here on the show on advocating. We never tell people who to vote for, but we talk about the things that are happening in the community, and we do share that you must vote. You must vote. And just thinking about that, we think about the people who suffered and died for our rights to vote. And today we're going to go back even further than that. We're going to go even before that. We're going to be talking about a courageous topic for sure. And it's going to take all of us to be just that courageous, even today, that, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for absolutely everything. Exactly. Absolutely everything.
Well, I'm going to go hit that buffet table while you introduce our speaker and our topic, so everybody know what we're talking about today, and everybody can turn the radios up a little bit. Go ahead and turn your radio up and lean in a little bit so you can make sure you get it all today, because this is
learn something. Yes,
good menu. All right, I'll be back.
All right, I want to welcome to the table. Kind of for the first time and kind of not for the first time, I want to welcome to the table Michelle Covington, Mrs. Michelle Covington. Michelle Covington is a technical writer extraordinaire, and she played a major part in a story regarding Nat Turner. I won't say exactly what she did yet because we'll give her a chance to discuss that. But she played a major role in a story of reimagining the consequences of one of the things that happened in regards to this revolt of Nat Turner. So welcome to the table, Michelle.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming to Sunday Brunch, to brunch with us and to feed us with this great information as they're trying to remove things from history books, as they're trying to remove even Black History Month. I say Black History Month is every month. It's History Month. You see the colors on my nails. I'm not playing with it.
Right.
Like we serious about this thing over here. We black on black on black on black on black.
Right.
And promoting that, and promoting that doesn't mean that we don't appreciate others. It's just the understanding of the value you have of yourself.
Right.
And I think, with Nat Turner, that was a part of that. He was able to see the value that he had of himself.
Yeah. So Nat Turner is one of those infamous figures in history general, not just, Black history, because of his insurrection and the lengths he went to try to free him and his people from slavery. People looked down upon his efforts because children were involved, and they had no discretion in terms of who needed to be gone in order for them to be free,
unalived.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. But what people often forget is that the original sin was slavery itself, and so you can't then point all of your anger at Nat Turner because of what he did without acknowledging the catalyst.
And what I said, whatever you're running from is what you're running to. People do that now with trauma. People will
Mm-hmm.
inflict trauma on you and then tell you how long you can be upset about it and how you should be able to display your feelings about it. And it doesn't matter what I do to you. Let me tell you how you should respond. The same thing happens now. So it was okay to brutalize bodies and kill people in the process, but it's not okay to do so in your pursuit of freedom.
As long as those bodies were black, it was
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And see, hearing about the stories of Nat Turner and how he went about, as they call it, the massacre, the reality is, like you were saying earlier, when you look at the number of Africans that were killed and the number of the rapings, the lynchings, and how they were just treated, the beatings and all, or whatever. You can't overlook those things. You can't condemn one group or one person when someone else has done the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Of course, those
So,
things were legal then. So
right, mm-hmm. and this is the part. We have to make sure that we're talking about these things. And I know we mention this, of course, because it's Black History Month. I look at folks and I tell them I'm Black all the time. I'm Black history every day.
right.
And we just have to make sure that we are having these conversations and not just during Black History Month. Because the question was raised to me, I think it was probably like in November, December time frame. And it might have been a little bit before then. We were just talking in reference to the whole issue or the concept of Black History Month. And I said, yeah, it's definitely necessary. I say continue Black History Month. I'm not necessarily saying we don't need to have it. However, we need to talk Black history and culture because we are history. We are a part of the history. And it doesn't necessarily need to be relegated to just a month, a short month at that. We
Right.
need to make sure we're having these conversations on a regular basis. And that's because of the contributions that our people have made to society.
Yes.
The back on our backs.
Right.
Absolutely. Michelle, tell us a little bit about the story of Nat Turner for those maybe who are not familiar. Like, who is Nat Turner? Tell us a little bit about his insurrection.
Okay, so Nat Turner was an enslaved person in Southampton County, Virginia, which is where I'm from. I'm from Boykins, which is a small town.
Yes, it is.
Southampton County.
And you better not speed through there. That's what I do know.
Oh no, they gonna get you. They gonna get right on 58. They gonna get you. So Nat Turner was enslaved there. His master at the time of his insurrection, his name was Joseph Travis. And Nat Turner was educated. He was a preacher. And he was noted for his intelligence, not just his education, but his ability to think in comparison to his counterparts. And so he had a large following as a preacher. And he had a vision from God, he said, a sign from God. It was a solar eclipse. And when he saw that solar eclipse, he took that as a sign that it was time for him to lead his people in an insurrection, in a revolt. And he did that on August 21st, 1831. Sorry, August 21st, 1831. He met, and his rebellion lasted for about 2 days before it was squashed by federal troops and militiamen from all over Southampton County and surrounding counties. In his insurrection, I believe about 55 white people were killed. Men, women, children. And as he went to each location, each house where they attacked, some of the enslaved people joined Nat Turner, and so his group grew to about 75. On the other hand, some of the enslaved people asked that they spare their masters and even work to save them, which is a whole, another thing all in itself.
We see that today too.
We do. We do. And so after those 2 days, most of the people who were with Nat Turner were captured and killed or put in prison for trial later on. Nat Turner eluded capture for about 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, he wasn't captured until October of 1831. October 31st of 1831, he was captured. So that's a long time, right? August 20, we'll say the 23rd to October 31st. Yep.
Okay.
When he was captured, they, of course, they had a trial for him. Of course, he was found guilty, and they hanged him in November of 1831. He was
Okay.
not buried. He was not given a burial.
Okay.
They, well, I don't know. I don't know because I have not seen any of the relics myself.
Okay.
But they say that he was skinned and they made things from his flesh for people to have as souvenirs. They
That is
dismembered
terrible.
him. They dismembered him and passed on pieces of his body to for people to hold on to. And I believe his brain or his was studied, was sent to be studied.
I hadn't heard that before. So that is interesting. So even in death, they had no respect for him even in death.
Oh,
In
absolutely
terms
not.
of
I'm
what he
sure
was fighting for.
But they revered his thinking because they wanted to figure out what was different in him specifically so they could probably prevent that happening
Exactly.
ever
Right.
again.
Yeah. What do
Why
we
was
need to
he
look
able
for
to
to stop someone else?
right.
Wow.
Well, there were a lot of consequences, of course, for his insurrection. Of course, the slave laws got more strict. You couldn't read, you couldn't write, you couldn't meet, you couldn't. All the things that enslaved people may have been able to do before, they certainly could not after the insurrection. Counter to that, though, it did reinforce this, or not reinforce, more so discredit this notion that the enslaved people were happy being enslaved, that they were content and taken care of. And so it bolstered the abolitionist movement because it was obvious that if you've got people down there who are willing to go to this length to be free, that they are not happy. They are not content.
It changed the narrative.
Yes.
Wow.
That is something right there that people were advocating to keep slaves because they like it like this. This is what they were made for, essentially. This is what they want to do. And his revolt and killing of those persons said, no, not today. Tell us what happened. There's a reason why you got involved. So tell us about that aspect of the story.
So there was a road in Southampton County named Blackhead Signpost Road. And it's not necessarily centered around Nat Turner himself, but during his revolt, he ended up at the Waller School, where some people were killed. And there was an enslaved man at the Waller School named Alfred. Alfred was not initially with Nat Turner, but he was there when they attacked. Levi Waller, a white man, hid in the bushes while people at the school, including his wife and children, were slaughtered.
He hid in the bushes while his wife was slaughtered.
He did. Now, no judgment, but yes, that's what he did.
I will.
Okay. He did. Yeah. And so Alfred then takes off running because he's not a part of the group. He doesn't know what's going on. And they follow him instead of Levi Waller, and it gives Levi Waller the opportunity to run away. So they find Alfred and convince him to join the group. But Alfred is never implicated in any of the murders that took place during the revolt. He was just tagging along. Maybe by force. We don't know. Maybe by choice. I don't know. But he was a part of it. And I lean more so towards force because at the first opportunity to leave the group, he did. He did.
Okay.
And so by the time he leaves Nat Turner's group, the militia and federal troops have entered Southampton County. And he is captured alone by the Southampton militia. They don't kill him because, they say they don't kill him because of the value that a slave at the time had. This
And
is
property.
This is free labor. This is property. This is not a person. This is something that I own. So they didn't kill him. They maimed him. They cut his Achilles tendon so that he could not run or rejoin Nat Turner and left him there because they were in pursuit of Nat Turner, the heavy hitter, not Alfred. Okay, so they left him there. The story goes that Levi Waller, his owner, came along and saw him and tried to bandage his wounds. And while he was there, the Greensville militia, now Greensville is it's a neighboring county. So, you've got all of these people who have come into Southampton County to solve this problem. From Greensville, we're right on the border of North Carolina. So there are people who have come from North Carolina. All these folks come to solve the problem. So the Greensville militia happens upon Alfred and Levi Waller. And the leader of the Greensville militia, his name is Dr. Scott. He says that he should not be spared. He should be made an example of.
Oh, wow.
And he chastises Levi Waller for bandaging him and, helping at all. They tie him to a tree, they shoot him, they decapitate him, and place his head on a post. And hence we get the name Blackhead Signpost Road. And that head, they say it stayed there for weeks. They say it's not the only head that was posted there. And that there's no definitive proof that it was actually Alfred, but his story fits the narrative best. So he's likely the person who was placed there on the post. But they, of course, were not taking notes or making records of the Black people that they killed after the fact. And he's just one, right? He's just one person who was killed who really didn't have anything to do with Nat Turner and his insurrection. And there were hundreds of Black people who were killed following the insurrection. Some, of course, were involved, but many of them were not.
They were targeted because they were Black.
They were just Black, and white folks were angry.
So were they
named the street after they put my head is just wrapping around the fact that you named the street after a piece of symbolism, I guess, to make an example of someone out of fear. So imagine having to walk past this road or drive on this road. Back then, I guess they're walking past the road. So the message and the trauma that they were dealing with in that, and just years down the road of having to, knowing that history, and me not knowing it, just thinking, if I knew the history, having to drive down this road to get somewhere. God forbid I lived on that street. You know?
I've gone past that placard many times. I've been through Boykins many times going towards Conway, North Carolina, and Murfreesboro, all those areas. Yes. And so I've seen the placard where they talk about Nat Turner. But I had not known that they had placed a head on a spike and it was related to this insurrection and had named it Blackhead. That's like Dr. Mason said, is definitely a way of reminding other people to stay in your place. Yeah. Stay here. We're talking about real strange fruit here. Stay exactly where we find you to be. And it's just a reminder, there was no grace in that. If you even rise up, this is what will happen.
Right. So the name just passed down from generation to generation to generation. We didn't actually get the street names. I think I was a child when the streets were actually named. Before, they were route and then a number. But then we had the 911 system place. They had to name the streets.
Are you telling me that it was just a route number initially, and
Right.
then when we got a 911 system, they had to name the streets, and that's what they chose to name that street?
That's what it was
Because it had
called.
been passed down from generation to generation to generation. I said, this is what we call this place?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well,
So-
and that happens across, communities and all. And really now I'm really going to start looking at different street names and try to make sure I get an understanding of what that really means. Because I know that some names may not necessarily be for the good. When you look at it, and why certain things were named a certain thing, where streets had certain names. I know we've gotten caught up with looking at naming of schools and buildings and things like that with schools and all, because I do know within some school divisions, they've changed the names of specific schools as they were named after certain people. And I remember looking at some of the names in which, for Hampton City schools, people, that had their names upon buildings, and the history that was behind some of those names, finding out, wow, you own slaves and you murdered slaves. And, so it was certain things that the expectation when you look at things, I mean, I would say it's hard to find a family that you can trace your roots back to slavery and say, oh, we didn't own slaves. That happened. I mean, that is a part of history. And I think we would all look crazy if we try to act as if that part didn't exist. But the reality is, if you've changed your ways, you know what I mean? And so we have to really look at that piece of it. But when we look at those naming of the school buildings and things of that nature, when you know the history of Robert E. Lee, it's like, wait a minute, hold on. How do we continue to send kids into these schools with those particular names? You're facing trauma, generational trauma, historical trauma every day. And we want you to feel good about yourself. We want you to feel good about your school when you find out that your school is named after a murdering racist. That's challenging.
Yeah.
And Michelle, tell us. You said you're from Boykins, and so I'm still stuck on how this name got transferred through generations. So how was it like growing up in that area than yourself? Because you said the street name became a name when you were like a child. So it's been going on for quite some time. It just recently got changed. So what was that like in that area then?
Actually, when we first brought up the idea of changing the name of the street, I was against it. Because it's the history. And if you change the name of the street to something that does not reflect the history, we lose it. Because there's nothing else there. There was nothing else there but the name of the street. And now, of course, it is controversial, but it does it sparks conversation because it is controversial. I would ride by the street and I remember asking my dad, like, what is Blackhead Signpost Road? Why is it called Black? And then he would tell me the story. Now, he didn't know necessarily all the details about Alfred and all that. I found that out in my research while we were working to rename the street. But he could tell me about Nat Turner, and he could tell me about the insurrection and what happened as a result of it. And so if you just erase Blackhead Signpost Road and make it something that people consider more palatable, then the story's gone. Story's gone. So growing up there, I was more so fascinated by the history. My parents, even in Southampton County, today, we don't talk about Nat Turner. They barely mention him in the school, and we're in Southampton County, and we don't talk about Nat Turner. Because a lot of the
I can imagine it create a division.
Right.
That's what my question was. How was it then growing up in this area? Because you have these same people who are then there, the same descendants of the slaves and the same descendants of the slave owners.
We don't talk about it.
And so
not talked about. Recently, well, I won't say recently because they were happening when I was a child. They would do tours, Nat Turner tours. where they would take you to the different landmarks where he attacked, or usually the buildings are not really there. There may be, some remnants of what was there, but most of the buildings have fallen down. But there was a guy when I was a kid, his name was James McGee. Black guy, he's got to be in his 90s now, 80s, 90s. He instilled in us, and my parents allowed us to be exposed to him and his wealth of knowledge, but he instilled in us the appreciation of our history, the value of knowing it, and understanding the power that comes along with being a Black person in America, and the struggle that we've overcome. He's always pushed for that and spread that education. And so my childhood, because my parents were adamant that we knew our history and exposed us to those things, we got the information, but I know a lot of my classmates did not.
And the thing is, you want to have these conversations because knowledge is power, of course. But how do you use them for the good?
Right.
And it's not just changing the name of the street or changing the name of a school or a building. You can't forget that history, and not and using the knowledge that you have to make things better, to help people understand. We don't want to turn back the hands of time. We want to make sure that we're continuing to move forward in a positive manner, because we can utilize our differences to build a sense of collectivism with one another and make us greater, build our communities and make them stronger, versus using them, our differences to be divisive. And that's what I've seen happening now, which is very disheartening. I see some divisiveness happening across the country in various communities and cultures, and I don't think that's a direction that we should be headed in.
It seems like the vision is there because there's still the silos. From what Michelle was talking about, these people are still existing in two different silos, and they're not having that conversation. And so secretly or on their own, Michelle, your family is still telling you the story from their perspective, and their families are still telling them the stories from their perspective. And so since the conversation is not being a joint conversation, none of those things are changing. Everybody's views are still the same, and those same ideas are still being transferred from generation to generation to generation to generation.
Well, ironically, one of the descendants of one of the white families were killed, Francis. He actually, his name is Rick Francis now, and he actually runs a Nat Turner tour.
Now that's the way to have a good conversation.
Right?
Yeah,
he does. He actually has a Nat Turner tour in Southampton County that you can pay to go see.
Have you seen this tour of his?
I have not been on his tour. As a child, I went on tour with Mr. James McGee.
Right.
And
it'd be interesting to hear the perspective. You know what I'm saying? As the differences in the stories, because two people can be in the same room and have two different stories about the same incident that occurred. Absolutely. And so it'd be interesting to hear his perspective of how this insurrection occurred. Is it more like, here are these people who were ungrateful and they didn't, appreciate what we had done to help them become civilized individuals, and they came and they killed us. And then we had to put them down. Is that the narrative of the story, or is it like, not our best moment in history?
I think it's more so the latter. I have met with him in my research and trying to, gather factual information about what happened to Alfred or and all the other people after the insurrection. And he's a decent guy.
And he knew about Alfred?
I don't think he had done the research to know the name of Blackhead Signpost Road. I'm not even sure if Blackhead Signpost Road is one of the stops on his tour. It may be now, because there's a historical marker there now. But
tell us about that marker. What does it say? Because the name has been changed. So what does the marker say?
So, the sign says Blackhead Signpost Road, And then it says, in August 1831, following the revolt led by enslaved preacher Nat Turner, white residents and militias retaliated by murdering an indeterminable number of African Americans, some involved in the revolt, some not, in Southampton County and elsewhere. At this intersection, where Turner's force had turned toward Jerusalem, now Cortland, the severed head of a black man was displayed on a post and left to decay, to terrorize others and deter future uprisings against slavery. The beheaded man may have been Alfred, an enslaved blacksmith, who, though not implicated in any revolt killings, was slain by militia near here. The name of this road was changed from Blackhead Signpost Road to Signpost Road in 2021.
Okay.
Right.
So you told us initially you were not for changing it, but now we found out that you were one of the integral people in changing that. So what then changed your mind?
So one of my really good friends, her name is Toya Garraway, she posted on Facebook that it's time to change the roads. And this was in 2020, after George Floyd and all of the Confederate flags coming down, the statues being moved, all of those conversations were being had. And so she posted, Southampton County is our turn. And so I called her because, I didn't want to argue with her on Facebook.
Right. We want to be civilized about this thing.
I was like, girl, what are you talking about? We're not changing those signs around here. For the same reason that I said, the history or whatever. And so she and I talked and we came to a compromise. And I said, girl, I will help you do this if we can replace it with a marker. Like, I don't mind changing the name of the road, but we can't lose the history in the process. So she and I, along with two other people, Mr. Travis Parker and Mr. Ricky Blunt. Mr. Blunt is now deceased. But the four of us worked together and we called ourselves Citizens Create Change. We worked together and we had to go through all the red tape in the Southampton County to change the name of the road, which was ridiculous.
I bet it was a lot of red tape.
Oh my gosh. There was, in order to change the name of the road, first you had to have 51% of the landowners consent.
Wow.
To renaming the road, which makes sense, I guess, because they would have to do the work, with their property and everything else. If the road name changes, it really doesn't affect people that don't live there.
Right. So let me ask you this. When you say landowners, you're talking about just the people on that road that are affected by that road, the name change of that road.
But it's not necessarily the people that live there. It's the people who own the land. So in Southampton County, there's a lot of farmland, not where people necessarily live. And so those people don't even live in Southampton County.
Right. That's what I was asking in reference to that. But they're the owners. So you may have someone who owns the land, but they're out Wisconsin somewhere.
Correct. So the first step was to change the law for that. Because that was the only way to rename the road. And so first we had to petition to amend that to allow the governing board of the county, which is called the Board of Supervisors, to allow the Board of Supervisors to initiate a name change if they felt necessary, if they felt it benefited the county overall, that we could forego the 51% of landowners and just go through the Board of Supervisors.
You changed the policy so that it gave you room to make the necessary changes.
Right. So that was the first step because people didn't want us to do that either.
That was just right there.
So that was the first step. And there are two boards you have to meet with. In Southampton County, there's a planning commission that kind of vets the agenda for the Board of Supervisors. So you have to meet with the planning commission first. And then if they see that your argument or issue is viable enough, then they will push it on to the Board of Supervisors. So we met with the planning commission, and they push us on to the Board of Supervisors, and they agreed to change the law for that. But then we had to meet again. We had to go back to the planning commission and actually have conversations about changing the name of the road. And we got a lot of kickback for that. Now, no one actually came out and said, I'm a racist and I don't want
right
how it is. But there were plenty of people who stood up and gave arguments against changing the name. Now, at first, we were trying to get the name changed to Alfred Road. Because right across the street, there is Barrow Road. And Barrow Road is named after Captain Barrow, who lived on that road and was attacked by Nat Turner and killed.
Oh my word.
Right. So you can't say we're going to name the street across the way this white guy who fought against Nat Turner, but we refuse to name the street right across from it after a black guy who was killed and had nothing to do with it. So we had those conversations, and of course, Alfred Road is not the name of the road.
Wow. So is the next step to petition to change the other side too?
No, well, and that was part of, I think one of the statements I made is that we have no intention of changing Barrow Road. It's fine that you named him. You named the road after Captain Barrow. He lived on the road. He fought for his life. And you honor him, whatever the case may be. Fine. But don't tell us you can do that, but we can't do this.
Right. So they didn't want to name the road Alfred Road.
No, they did not want to name it Alfred Road. Not at all. Because
they really support the captain on the other side. That's the narrative, because it's like this we support the end of this insurrection. Yeah. And they didn't want to support anybody that rose up against them.
Perhaps. Yeah.
So what's the name of the road?
Now it's just Signpost Road. They took off Blackhead. That was a compromise.
Okay.
Got rid of Blackhead and just named it Signpost Road. But Alfred is mentioned on the historical marker.
Okay. And so at some point, I guess, is the sign, the historical marker in a prominent location so that people can actually see what this was all about, so they will understand the history behind all of this.
Yes, it's right at the intersection of Meharon Road, which is 35. That's heavily traveled road. And what is now Signpost Road. So it's right there on the corner. And since it has been erected, it has actually been vandalized.
Oh, wow.
It has actually been vandalized. We have, there are a few signs about Nat Turner in the county, and they are constantly vandalized. So I knew it was coming.
That speaks volumes.
I knew it was coming.
That speaks volumes that the division is still very much prevalent. You don't know how many people are supportive of that, but you know that it is still a concern.
Yeah.
Wow. And with that, what's the feeling in the county when the vandalism occurs? What does that stir up anything in the county with people?
So you get mixed feelings, right? Some, of course, supported the renaming of the sign in the first place and support the education, of controversial history. And so there, we shouldn't be doing this, that kind of feedback. And then you have others who say there was nothing wrong with the name of the road in the first place. And then there's a conversation. So we take Blackhead Signpost Road off one sign and just put it on another. Right? So the state marker, the title of it is Blackhead Signpost Road, because that is what the marker is about. So someone has taken some spray paint and spray painted over the Blackhead part and just left Signpost Road on one side of the marker.
Right.
And so who do you, I don't even know who to point the finger at. Is it someone who is angry because it still says Blackhead somewhere?
Right. That's what I was about to say. So that sounds like it's possible.
Right. Is it someone who did not want us to have a marker up in the first place? Didn't want it changed in the first place? I don't know. I don't know.
That is the most.
Yeah.
But see, and I'm looking at, and I know people talk about sometimes, and not to stereotype small towns like Boykins, but when you look at race relations, people tend to think that that's very common in terms of the division. But it's one of those things that you also, I remember, watching some of the older movies and stuff like that or whatever, and they depicted, sometimes some of your southern states who would, whereas you would have whites that says, well, we like our colors, we like our blacks, we like our Negroes, we all know our place, and so that it's we all get along. We get along because they are doing what you need them to do, but are you getting along because you're able to treat them equally? They can have the house and the picket fence like you can, or are they just able to clean your house with the picket fence?
Right.
So
are the neighborhoods very much still divided?
Yes.
And segregate. Yeah. There you go. So not only do you not need to come over here and change the name of this street, don't move on this street either.
Well, Blackhead Signpost Road, I had an aunt that lived on Blackhead Signpost Road before she passed away. And I have a cousin there too. And I think there are some sprinkles of white people on that road. But in the country, the houses are not that close together. There was no walking when as a kid, there was no walking anywhere. So, my neighbor may be a mile or two down the road. So it's only in, some like the towns maybe where the houses are closer together where you'll see, oh, this is where we live and this is where they live.
And this side of the train track over versus that side.
Right. Gotcha. But in general, houses are so far spread out that it's not necessarily clustered like that.
Gotcha.
So I'm from Boykins, but Blackhead Signpost Road is actually in Cortland. Which is another small town in Southampton County. It's actually the seat of the county. It used to be called Jerusalem, but now it's called Cortland. Yeah, that's where they had the trials and where they hanged Nat Turner and his followers as well. And there was actually another road we were considering. It's called Hanging Tree Road.
Oh my God.
See, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? But
it
sounds terrible.
It sounds terrible. But it has nothing to do with lynchings at all. We did some research on it and found that it's really just about low-hanging branches that needed to be cut often.
That sounds like some strange fruit to me anyway.
Right.
Listen.
There are no records of I must emphasize that there are no records of any type of mob lynchings in Southampton County. And the tree where the criminals were actually hanged was not on Hanging Tree Road. So the only story I've ever been able to uncover is that it's actually low-hanging branches. And so we did not changing that road name further just because we didn't have the history to back it up.
I feel like it needs a placard, though.
I do.
I feel like it needs, that's the part of this conversation is the education aspect of it.
Right.
Like, because people will make natural assumptions just by the title of it. It warrants a story. It's part of the narrative, too.
Yeah.
Because other people may become emboldened by that conversation, or that title of that specifically. So it's nice to be clear.
Yes.
Right.
It sounds awful, and I'm sure there are other things we could have named.
Right.
Besides,
right.
But
Hanging Tree Road.
But
it just doesn't sound righteous at all. It doesn't sound like it's a place I want to be.
I certainly wouldn't turn on that road. I don't care what the GPS tell me.
I'm going to ride in the ditch when I turn around before I turn down that road. I promise you.
No, sir.
Put it in a whole other drive.
Siri, pick another way. I'm not going that way.
Anyway, you have arrived at your destination. No, I have not, Siri. No, I have not arrived. I have not arrived. Yeah.
No,
words mean something. Words mean something. Michelle, before we get out of here, just tell us briefly how you fell in love with words, because you're a writer. And so you've been talking about all this research you've done. This is historical research. So tell us just a little bit about how you fell in love with words.
It was high school. My senior year in high school, my favorite English teacher, Miss Michelle Barlow, who passed away, told me I was a good writer. She read my senior thesis and she said, oh, this is it. And since then, I went to Norfolk State and I majored in biology. Poor choice.
What? And you are a writer and you majored in I see.
I was convinced I was going to be a pediatrician. I don't know.
That's not
I
why
went there. I know. I don't care nothing about that Hampton University stuff. Get that out of here. Norfolk State University. But I ended up changing my major to English. And found my place. And so I've taught English. I taught English for about 15, 16 years. I taught in South Denver County for a few, and I taught in Hampton City Schools. I was actually a teacher when we went through this whole road name change stuff. I was a teacher, teaching writing. And now I'm a technical writer. I did leave education. And I still write. So I love words. I was sharing before we started this that I am not a talker. I am a writer. Every time I had to get up and speak in front of the planning commission or the board of supervisors, I had a whole speech written out for me to go off of. Because I think words, like you said, words matter.
They matter.
I like to take the time to choose the ones I really intend to say. So
I really respect that. And I could tell by the way you've been very cautious of being thoughtful in your responses. But it's been a great conversation. And words do matter. And there's room for people to be able to express themselves in many ways. That's why I asked you that question. Everybody is not one who can just talk on the fly, but it doesn't mean they don't have anything to say.
Right.
And there's other ways to say it and still be very meaningful in your communities and still show up in very powerful ways.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It has definitely been a great time at Sunday Brunch.
We've enjoyed this. I like the history aspect, the historical information and all. It's definitely been enlightening. And thought-provoking, just kind of where do we go from here? What do we do? And so I certainly applaud you for the research component in which you've done, but then also for putting that into action.
Thank you. It was definitely a group effort. While the four of us were at the center of it, filing applications and showing up for the meetings and town halls and everything, the whole community, Black and white, who wanted to change, everybody participated. The marker is not free. The marker is almost $2,000. And we did not have to come out of pocket for that because people in our community, from our community who are no longer there, all donated the money to have the marker erected. So
that in itself is powerful, that even when you see opposition or you feel like you are opposed, there always be people there that you can still collaborate with and work with to get the goal accomplished. So that was nice that you still had that support.
So real quick, let me ask you this. So did you find more people that live outside of the county now being a part of the supportive cast of characters for this name change and the erection of the marker, or were there, just as many people who still live there?
Just as many people who live there.
That's good to hear.
People. Yeah, they would come to the Board of Supervisors meetings, and while I would have my speech prepared, they had theirs. And they would get up and give their personal experience having had to ride by that intersection, or family members who grew up on that street, or the stories that they have to tell their kids about what Blackhead Signpost Road is. And I think it was necessary to add context. Blackhead Signpost Road by itself was not enough.
Right.
There needed to be
context. Context is important.
Context added to the name of the street.
Now, do you have direct descendants to that area? You said you kind of grew up there. Your father told you stories. Do you have descendants to Nat, or?
I don't know that I am related to Nat Turner. I have, so Mr. McGee is a historian and painter and everything else regarding Nat Turner specifically. And he has informed me that I could probably trace my lineage back to one of the people who was with Nat Turner, but not Nat Turner himself. Yeah. So my maiden name is Faison, and I believe there was a Faison plantation.
That's a whole nother conversation right there. Growing up in an area where there's a plantation named,
It's no longer
sweet baby
there. It's no longer there. You know, it's not like these things you
They've
see like in
leveled the actual
Williamsburg where they
plantation building, but the plantation is the land is there.
The land is there.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
And
thank
Atkins
you.
is my mother's maiden name. So Atkins is out there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your history, your family history, because that's your area, you know. And I know we always talk about driving through Boykins and seeing the sign and all. So
don't blink, you'll miss it.
I know which road I'm not going to turn on.
Right, I'm not going to ride down Hanging Tree Road, so that's for sure. If anybody tell you I was on that road, I was forced at gunpoint. All right,
Understood.
That part.
Well, listen, we've had a time right here at the table once again. So thank you all so much for joining us. I am Dr. Richard Mason.
I'm Dr. Tamara Williams.
Join us right back here next week on WHOB 88.1.
The essence of HU.
Keep your force.
Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you.
Thank you for joining us at the table.
Tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for more delicious topical recipes for life on the Sunday Brunch.
On Smooth 88.1 WHOV.